Hello everyone, my name is Kate and welcome to my booktube. It's been a while since I've posted any videos with my beautiful face in them, but I'm ready to make up for lost time. Today I'm doing something a little different. I'm here to talk about the amazing Loki, God of Mischief, and how his gender and sexuality have been portrayed in the comics versus in the myths. If you are interested in anything I talk about today, the sources will be down below. Now let's get to the video. I went into this project looking for Loki's transformation from the gender-fluid character from the myths to the asexual character from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Loki is the god of mischief, fire, and chaos. He is often an antagonist to the Aesir, the pantheon of Norse gods from Asgard. He is also seen as an Aesir himself, despite being a son of Jotnar. Loki has also become a famous character in the Marvel Comics and Cinematic Universe, where he is portrayed as a Jotun who was adopted / stolen by the Aesir King Odin as a baby. I hypothesized that Loki's sexuality and gender would be portrayed as a mix of masculine and feminine expectations, which would in turn easily label him as gender fluid and pansexual, or maybe bisexual or omnisexual. We would then be able to see a clear separation between his mythological self and his comic book counterpart, with the comics having pushed Loki into a more cisgender, heterosexual direction despite his ability to shapeshift. One aspect of the research that I was sure of is that Loki in the movies, as played by Tom Hiddleston, does not show any sexual affinity and is always portrayed as a man, even when he shapeshifts. So, here's the question. Has Loki's gender and sexuality evolved so dramatically over time, or is the change less obvious? To answer this question, we must first look at the myths themselves. For many reasons, Loki has become a gender-fluid icon in the LGBTQ community. Loki is a well-known shapeshifter, having shapeshifted into the shape of many different women throughout the myths. When planning to kill the fair Balder, he transformed into a woman to ask Frigga for information. After he killed Balder, he reportedly transformed into a giant who refused to weep for Balder, therefore stopping him from leaving Hel. He dressed up as a handmaiden to help Thor get his hammer back from Jotunheim. Loki was even a mother, having born a child as a mare after having sex with a horse. Not kidding here. From this evidence, it would be easy to assume that Loki's gender and sexuality are anything except normal. But it may be more complicated than that. It is important to remember why Loki made these choices. Most of the times, Loki transforms into a female form. It is to meet an end. Loki is the god of mischief, and his shapeshifting ability is one of his greatest tools. He never transforms into a woman for enjoyment. He transforms in order to trick people. He turns into a woman to trick Frigga, a giantess, so he can hinder the Aesir's plan to revive Balder. Loki was impregnated because the Aesir forced him to solve their problem. A Jotun came to Asgard and said he could build a wall around Asgard in exchange for the hand in marriage of the goddess of fertility Freya. Loki persuaded the Aesir to agree, but to give him a time limit. But they also allowed the Jotun the help of his hearse. Apparently this hearse was quite impressive and did most of the work himself. The wall was being finished too quickly, so the Aesir blamed Loki and forced him to solve their problem. Loki transformed into a mare to distract the hearse. This distraction led to Loki giving birth to a 8-legged fowl. If we look at the few moments where Loki's sexuality is actually addressed, he is always with a woman. Whether with his wife Signe or his mistress Arngboda, he fathers multiple children between the two women, 2 with Signe, 3 with Arngboda. Though his offspring with Arngboda are a little unusual, one being a massive snake, one a wolf, and the last the goddess of the dead. The only thing we can assume from this is that Loki is not necessarily uncomfortable in a female form. There is clear evidence of this when Loki transformed into a handmaiden. Thor's hammer was stolen by the king of Jotunheim. The king announced that he would only give back the hammer for Freya's hand in marriage. I'm seeing a pattern here. Heimdall told Thor that he should disguise himself as Freya, but Thor is afraid he'll look unmanly. In contrast, Loki urges Thor against an action and even joins him as a handmaiden. This story is one of the few moments when it becomes obvious that how the other Aesir see Loki's behavior. Transforming into a woman is unmanly, even if it is done for manly feats. Vikings didn't view gender in exactly the same way as we do now. Historian of medieval women, Jenny Jochens, has done a lot of research on the subject. In her article, Feminist Scholarship in Old Norse Studies, she explains how there are 2 major groups of thought in relation to Norse gender expectations. Hilda Kress cites the theory of the strong Nordic woman. This is a woman who is independent and equal to men. In contrast, Carol Clever theorizes that there was only one Nordic gender, man. Everyone, male and female, could receive this status. In short, this means that the Nordic culture only admired male prowess, but believed that men and women could show these traits of strength and bravery. Jochens explains that these 2 theories have a lot in common, but one glorifies Nordic women and the other dismisses them. While both helpful, Clever's theory of the one Nordic gender is the most useful when looking at the character of Loki. Whether or not Loki identified as feminine, masculine, or both, the other gods saw him as feminine. As Thor explained earlier, that was not a good thing. In the Lokasenna, a story where Loki throws shade at the entire Norse pantheon, Loki receives multiple insults about being feminine. Odin says to Loki, "Milking the cows as a maid, ay, and babes didst thou bear? Unmanly thy soul must seem." And Njordi said, But a wonder it is, this womanish god comes hither, though babes he has borne. In this way, Thor is by far the worst offender. He repeats, unmanly one, cease, or the mighty hammer Mjolnir shall close thy mouth. But what is this in comparison to modern interpretations such as Marvel Comics? The question is complicated in a sense, because the comics really had two Lokis. I'm not talking about alternate dimensions here either, but rebirth. For the most part, comic Loki is very similar to mythological Loki. He has the same wife, the same mistress, the same children, and lived through a lot of the same stories. He has a slightly different background, having been the son of the Jotun king Laufey before he was kidnapped and adopted by Odin. He continues to have sexual relationships with various women, and also continues to shapeshift into women. The main difference is that any romantic feelings that the mythological Loki may have felt, comic Loki is missing. In the comics, Loki and Signe show each other compassion. When Loki is being punished for Baldur's death, Signe sits by him and tries to protect him from the venom that a serpent is continuously dropping into his face. In the comics, Signe is mostly ignored and probably died without anyone noticing. Similarly, Loki may have slept with many women and had many children in the comics, but he feels no emotional connection to them. He had dalliances in order to create powerful relationships, not platonic love. The only characters that he shows strong feelings about are his adopted family, and most of those feelings are ones of anger. Comic Loki often shapeshifts into women, spending a long time as Lady Loki after Ragnarok, and also a time pretending to be Scarlet Witch. But these appearances are used to deceive those around him. There is never actually a hint that he connects with these female roles. He has also kissed men in the comics, including Hawkeye, but these kisses are less to do with emotion and more to do with trickery. In a way, Loki is portrayed as asexual. He only uses sex for other gains instead of actual pleasure. In a way, the movie portrayal of Loki only emphasizes this part of his character, ignoring Loki's sex life completely to focus on Loki's familial bonds. One of the most important parts of the movie is Loki's relationship with his brother Thor. His brother is seen as the ideal man, while Loki is looked down upon as he puts more focus on magic than brute strength. This fits very well with R.W. Connell's theory of hegemonic masculinity, the theory of ideal manhood. Basically, the theory states that there is a man that perfectly identifies with the masculine ideals of the time, the hegemonic man. Now, one does not need to be a man to be masculine, or masculine to be a man, but the hegemonic man is not meant to incite a fluidity of gender. He is supposed to represent what society thinks a man should act like, masculine. He is on top of the ladder with all the other men below him, trying to climb to the top. This hegemonic male does not actually exist in real life, only in the minds of men trying to rise their way up the ladder. They are continuously pushing other men lower down the ladder so they can get closer to the top. All it takes is maybe 10 minutes watching Thor to know that Thor is the hegemonic man of Loki's world. Thor is the perfect masculine man who Loki will never be able to compare himself to. But As there are two princes vying for the throne, Loki will never be able to remove himself from the shadow his brother created. Much of Loki's anger comes from knowing that he is very talented, but will never be seen as enough because he is not his brother. He is not as masculine as his brother. This is interesting when compared to the gender ideals of Nordic culture. These two cultures have many similarities. Both had a concept of ideal masculinity, and in both time periods, men have fought to be associated with that ideal. In a way, Nordic culture puts even more focus on masculine context than modern Western culture, as they needed masculine people, men or women, for their society to survive. They need to be a warrior culture. In a way, putting two Norse gods in a modern context only highlights how prevalent masculine ideals are. Though their relationships have changed, there is still the manly man, and Loki is still seen as lesser by the Norse gods because he is more feminine than Thor. When it comes down to it, Loki's sexuality was never that important to the story. What was important was how he was perceived. In the myths, the comics, and the movies, Loki is seen as more feminine than the other Aesir because of his affinity for magic. This feminine label stuck and left him as an outsider. He was never going to truly fit in with the Aesir, so he used his magic for other purposes, mainly trickery. His gender and sexuality stay pretty similar throughout the years because, let's be real, Loki's true gender is mischief. Loki spends too much time tricking people and planning Ragnarok to think about his identity outside of it. This is what makes his rebirth in the comics so interesting. In the comics, Loki dies and is reborn as Kid Loki. Kid Loki is not Loki. He does not have the same memories and relationships as Loki. In a sense, Loki is finally free because he no longer has the expectations of trickery and evil that followed him his whole life. Kid Loki wants to be a better person than Loki was. During his comic run, Kid Loki begins to explore his gender and sexuality. The author decided to portray Kid Loki as bisexual and gender fluid. This is so interesting because it shows that these labels only mattered to Loki when he lost his identity as a trickster. If he's not evil, then what is he? Kid Loki got the chance to find out. Now, this comic run was short, and so Loki was back to his trickster self and running for president. But the fact still stands. Loki can only explore other parts of his identity when he is no longer focused on his identity as a trickster. Now, this research was done mostly because of the Loki TV show that is in production, and so many people have been wondering how Loki's gender and sexuality will be portrayed now that Loki is no longer in his brother's shadow. There are theories that either Lady Loki or the Enchantress will be appearing because of these nice photos. Either way, that means that we will see a side of the MCU Loki that we have never seen before. Earlier this year, I was hoping that Loki would be portrayed as a gender-fluid bisexual icon. But now, I just hope that the show's creators ask themselves, who is Loki? And try to get the character to question their own identity when trickery is no longer involved.